I want to take a look at, and we just got a couple of seconds here. We'll kind of finish up on this in the next segment. We got a longer segment. This is a story from American Enterprise Institute, and they're going back and looking at 18 spectacularly wrong predictions made the time of the first Earth Day, 1970. So here we are, 47 years in, and quite frankly, I remember when this all happened. I remember a lot of my friends freaking out about how we're going to have massive starvation. We're going to have a new ice age, so forth and so on. Yes, all the predictions have changed, haven't they? They were worried about nitrogen blocking out the sun, and now the big boogeyman is carbon. What they mean by that is carbon dioxide. You know, the stuff that is essential for plants to live, carbon dioxide that you breathe out. The plants take that in. They use that to grow, and then they give us oxygen, which we need. It's a wonderful symbiotic relationship that God designed. It's a closed loop that has its own correcting mechanism in it, but of course, they have to get us afraid of that. We're going to take a look at these predictions, and they went back and they looked at a May 2000 issue of Reason magazine, and it was pretty ridiculous even at that time. It's gotten even more ridiculous now, another 17 years later. That was the 30th anniversary there, so they update it with some additional things. We've got 18 different ways where the Earth, because science people, got it spectacularly wrong. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight. We were talking about Earth Day, and not Earth Day 2 days ago, but Earth Day 47 years ago. Let's go back to 1970. Let's take a look at some of the dire predictions, as the American Enterprise Institute points out. They got it not only wrong, but spectacularly wrong. Back in 1970, they point out in their article in the May 2000 issue of Reason magazine, an award-winning science correspondent, Ronald Bailey, wrote an excellent article, Earth Day Then and Now. And that was 30 years on. Bailey noted that around the time of the first Earth Day in 1970 and in the years following, there was a torrent of apocalyptic predictions. Well, it's now the 47th anniversary, they point out. Good time to see where this went right and where it went wrong. I don't know that they got anything right. It'd be interesting to see if CNN has done an article of where the Earth Day people and the environmental movement got it right. I'd like to see if they can actually try to make a case where they got it right. So here's one. Harvard biologist George Wald estimated that, quote, civilization will end in 15 or 30 years. This is in 1970. Because I have to remind you that this is in 1970 because we keep hearing this type of stuff, don't we? It's always this moving, you know, couple of decades out. It's 15, 20, 30 years, 50 years out. Because I love to talk about climate science. When I was at the meteorological convention, the American Meteorological Association, the AMA, had their convention here a couple of years ago. I went with Rob Jacobson, who was filming, and we talked to the scientists there. And there were actually real scientists there who were looking at weather models that they would come up with the different factors that they thought were relevant, try to get measurements as accurate as they could, and then they would feed it in here and look at the predictions and then look at what actually happened a day or two or three or a week later. And they just couldn't get it right. And everybody there, I mean, it's a massive meeting. And everybody had their own models that they were working on and doing their experiments with. And then looking at it, it's like, well, we got this part of it right, but we didn't get this part of it. Or, you know, we're getting there maybe about 50% of the time or 60% of the time or whatever. What you don't see with climate science is the fact that they're making these predictions that are decades or centuries out. And, of course, they can't ever be tested. So it's an open loop. And so they're not going to come to you like they did at the American Meteorological Society and say, here's our model, and we predicted this, and then 3 days later or a week later or the next day, it's exactly what happened, so our model is right. No, they don't do that because they just resort to the fact that we're scientists. We own science. I have this degree in climate science, so trust me. I know what I'm talking about. Aren't you impressed? I even have a computer printout from the model that I can't test. So you should do exactly what I say. And they were talking there, and there was a Soros group that had a political booth there. It was the only political booth we saw. And of course, it was some Soros people. And they had a booth there, and they were bemoaning the fact that it was meteorologists who were not signing on to this. And he said, look, most meteorologists are not signing on to man-made climate change. And we need to change this. You people need to step up and lead. Because if you tell people this, they'll believe you. You have authority. See, that's the game that they play. They're telling all these scientists in the various universities, you need to tell people this because you have a PhD in something. In many cases, it's unrelated. You know, most of the people who are the leaders, like Michael Mann, they don't have a PhD in climate. They have a PhD in something else. But they're pontificating about this from their position of authority. So they're telling the meteorologists, look, you're talking about weather all the time. If you tell people that we're going to have catastrophic global warming, they'll believe you. You need to play along with us. You need to do this for the sake of the planet. And they simply don't believe it. Why? Because they're trying to predict the weather all the time, and it's absolutely absurd to them that these people are going to know what's going to happen decades, centuries out. And so he had this guy saying 15 or 30 years from now, unless immediate action is taken, he said, we're going to have civilization ending. Well, there's some more specific ones. Here's another one. Population will inevitably and completely outstrip whatever small increases in food supplies we make. This is Paul Ehrlich. This guy's still around making predictions. He said this in April 1970. He said the death rate will increase until at least 100 to 200 million people per year will be starving to death during the next 10 years. Because at that time, they thought they were going into an ice age. Most of the people who are going to die in the great cataclysm of history and man have already been born, wrote Paul Ehrlich in a 1969 essay called Eco-Catastrophe. He said by 1975, some experts feel that food shortages will have escalated the present level of world hunger and starvation into famines of unbelievable proportions. Yes, the proportions that they saw this escalating to truly were unbelievable. Here's another one. It is already too late to avoid mass starvation, declared Dennis Hayes. He was a chief organizer for the first Earth Day, spring 1970. And then we have another one. Peter Gunter, North Texas State University professor, wrote in 1970, demographers agree almost unanimously on the following grim timetable. By 1975, widespread famines will begin in India. They will be spread by 1990 to include all of India, Pakistan, China, and the Near East, Africa. By the year 2000, or conceivably sooner, South and Central America will exist under famine conditions. The only place that happened, by the way, is where the socialists took over, Venezuela. See, it's global socialism that we need to be worried about, not man-made global climate change. It's global socialism that has brought us widespread famines. Nothing else, folks, nothing else. It's when the government takes control of the means of production, when government seizes the energy resources, when government shuts us down. That's when we have famine. That's the only thing that you really need to be afraid of here, folks, not the climate. The only place where this came true is in Venezuela. But they were saying there was this timetable, 1975, widespread famines in India. By 90, it's going to go other places. Even by 2000, it's going to be South and Central America. By the year 2000, 30 years from now, he said, the entire world, with the exception of Western Europe, North America, and Australia, will be in famine. Another guy talks about the buildup of nitrogen, not carbon, nitrogen. He said it's only a matter of time before light will be filtered out of the atmosphere and none of our land will be usable. Barry Commoner predicted the decaying organic pollutants would use up all the oxygen in America's rivers, causing freshwater fish to suffocate. Paul Ehrlich, 1970, Audubon magazine, said DDT and other chlorinated hydrocarbons may have substantially reduced the life expectancy of people born since 1945. Paul Ehrlich warned in 1970 that Americans born since 1946 now have a life expectancy of only 49 years. And he predicted that if current patterns continued, this expectancy would reach 42 years, okay, by 1980. And then here's one I want to show you some more information on. Ecologist Kenneth Watt declared, by the year 2000, if present trends continue, we'll be using up crude oil at such a rate that there won't be any more crude oil. You'll drive up to the pump and say, fill her up, buddy. And he'll say, sorry, guy, there isn't any. Okay, well, now that was 1970, and then the predictions got even more dire. This is a guy who was saying by the year 2000, we're going to run out of oil. Okay, and then here are my favorite artifacts from the past. Okay, get a picture of this here. Newsweek magazine, July 1979, The Energy Crisis, a program for the 1980s. And if we pull in here, we look at this interesting graphic, why we must act now. Because at that point, in 1979, they were now saying, not that they had another 30 years only of oil, but they only had 8.7 years left of oil. And understand, this is not only the wacko environmentalists, but this is also the CIA, and Exxon, organizations like that, who want you to think that their products are scarce. They want to be the De Beers of the diamond industry. Many people say, why would Rex Tillerson push climate change and man-made global warming? Well, it's because Exxon wants to be to oil what De Beers is to diamonds. They want to tell you that they have all of the vanishing resources. It's only the dinosaurs that created this. It's not something that's ongoing, that's created by organic material. No, it was done by the dinosaurs, so we have a finite supply of this stuff. It's going to run out. They were telling us in 1979 we had 8.7 years left of crude oil, we had 10.7 years left of natural gas, and we had 666 years left of coal. That right there, because we had so much coal, even with their dire predictions. They were telling us we had no oil, no natural gas going to be left in another decade, but we had centuries left of coal. That was why they had to shut down coal. That right there was why they had to shut down coal. They wanted to take over our energy, and they wanted to starve us out as the socialists, as the authoritarians did in Venezuela. And, of course, Time Magazine was doing the same stuff. It was not just one wacko issue from Newsweek. Everybody was telling us this. Everybody was telling us as we lined up for gasoline, and we did even and odd tags on alternating days, with a manufactured crisis, a crisis that was manufactured by the Saudis, by OPEC, and by their allies in the CIA, the people that they had worked with to put us on the petrodollar, to rig our currency, to rig our economy. All these people were working together to push this phony narrative that there's only so much oil on the ground. Sooner or later, there won't be enough to get around, as Tower Power used to say. And I didn't believe it. I liked the songs. I enjoyed some of the stuff. But I saved these magazines. I told my wife, I said, these are going to be collector's items someday. I never realized I would be on the radio showing them to millions of people to wake you up, to get you to understand these people are not authorities. We had all these vaunted authorities on Earth Day with these dire predictions, telling us that 9/10 of the tropical rainforest will be removed within the next 30 years. All this stuff was going to happen because, 2000 was going to be the date that everything was going to magically fall in place. It was going to be a policy of austerity, starvation, famine. But it didn't happen except in Venezuela, where Bernie Sanders wants to bring that system of government to us. And, of course, the European Union wants to do that as well. We see riots in the wake of the election yesterday. We have riots happening now in Paris. Police have been injured, 143 arrests, as the far left, the anti-fascists, the same people that we see here, Antifa, these are the same people that are rioting here. Look, let's understand. They're using all of the same phony narratives, saying the Russians are going to be hacking the elections in Paris and so forth and so on. How many times are we going to hear the same stuff? How many times are we going to see the same people organizing this opposition in the same way? It's the same movie we just had here in America. The question is, will the French wake up? And the other question is, will Trump follow through? We have good and bad signs on whether or not Trump will follow through. And, of course, he's made some good comments. We're going to talk more about that tonight on the Nightly News. He's made some very good moves. Some things that he's done in terms of the war, I think, are going to be very counterproductive, if not destructive, of the movement against the globalists, because the key part of what they want to do is to create war.
If you are receiving this transmission, you are the resistance.
In ancient times, man roamed the earth in a constant state of hunting or being hunted. Introducing Caveman, where cutting-edge science meets ancient super nutrients. Secure your bottle right now at InfoWarsStore.com.